Hello, this is John Flutter here again. Welcome back to the channel, Myofunctional Orthodontic Training. If you like what we say, please give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I'm often asked about arch development. I'm often asked when we do arch development. I'm often asked why we do arch development, and I'm often asked how we do arch development. And I want to just do a short video now just to outline some of the principles behind when I consider doing arch development and when I don't. What we're trying to do with arch development is to develop the nasomaxillary complex so it's got enough sagittal and transverse development to give us a good nasal airway and to position the maxillary arch sufficiently far forward within the cranial complex to give us a good pharyngeal airway. And when the tongue is in the roof of the mouth during growth and development, the teeth erupt around the tongue, and then the upper jaw is the shape and size of the tongue. But if the tongue falls from the roof of the mouth, not only do we get inadequate transverse and sagittal development because the cheeks and the lips push the upper jaw in, but also the nasomaxillary complex fails to grow adequately forwards. And as it fails to grow adequately forwards, that's when we get a reduction in the pharyngeal airway. Now, when the children are young, when they're in the early mixed dentition in particular, when they've got maybe 1 or 2 lower incisors, the tongue alone can be trained to give you adequate arch development in the upper jaw. So if we use an appliance like a Myobrace, which is what I've been using now for some 25 years, maybe a bit more, when the appliance is worn well, and the tongue learns to rest and function in the palate, that alone will give you adequate arch development, so that ideally we want to have enough room for all the 4 permanent erupting incisors, upper incisors. And when the children are young and they wear the Myobrace well, we get that arch development. The upper jaw develops the shape and size of the tongue, and then we're going to get well aligned upper incisors. And because the tongue comes upwards and forwards with the jaw, they both come up together. When the tongue goes up to support the upper arch, the lower jaw comes forward to match it. If we get more downward and backward growth, if the tongue is not supporting the upper arch forward, if the lower lip is trapped behind the upper incisors, and in the swallowing pattern the lower lip is sucked back up behind the upper incisors, then you'll end up with a increased overjet, the size of the overjet reflecting the volume of the lower lip that's trapped behind the upper incisors. So it's very tempting to think that the maxillary arch is in the correct place, but in fact the maxilla, even in those circumstances, is set back from the ideal position. The tongue has not been in the upper arch sufficiently to develop it to its ideal forward position. And the same is true when we have a mouth breathing pattern. When we have a mouth breathing pattern, both upper and lower jaw drop downward and backwards. The mouth is open all the time. The lower jaw swings down and back. The upper jaw doesn't get either the transverse or the sagittal development it requires from the tongue, nor is it pushed forwards into that correct position within the cranial complex. And when I see these severe mouth breathing patterns with anterior and posterior crossbites, often with an anterior open bite in the primary or in the early mixed dentition, then I would always develop that. And I developed that with an appliance I call the BioBlock Stage 1, designed and developed by Professor John Mew, an English orthodontist, and we do courses and hands-on training on how to use these appliances. We make them in our laboratory. And with that appliance, I can create room in the upper arch for the tongue. And then the hard work begins, because then what we have to do is to train the tongue to support that. That means establishing nasal breathing. That means establishing lip seal. That means establishing tongue in the roof of the mouth posture. The purpose of the Myobrace is to do two things: to train the lips to be together and the tongue to be in the roof of the mouth. And if the lips are together and the tongue in the roof of the mouth, the upper arch form that has been developed with the tongue, with the Myobrace, has been developed with the bar block stage 1, can be maintained with the tongue. But it requires training, it requires effort, it requires a commitment on the child and on their family. And when you do that, then we can get the maxillary arch developed transversely, sagittally, and brought forward within the cranium. The nasomaxillary angle will reduce as the maxilla comes forwards. But SNA and SNB won't change, because they're both measured off nasion, which moves forwards when the maxilla moves forwards. And we can see that this is not a genetic variation, this is a developmental variation. And so in the primary dentition, I would always expand if I've got an anterior or posterior crossbite and an anterior open bite. That's the sort of case we've got an habitual mouth breather, and I know that child has got severe problems with breathing. They're a sick child, they're habitually breathing through their mouth, they won't be sleeping well, their intellectual development will be reduced, their sporting activity will be reduced. And if you look in the mouth and you see an anterior crossbite, and you mistakenly think that somehow she's got an overgrown mandible, you're missing the point that her maxilla is underdeveloped and it's set back within the cranium. She needs help. We're in a position to help her, and we help her by doing arch expansion and supporting that arch expansion by lip training, tongue training, breathing exercises. And the success of the program depends on the success of those activities being completed regularly and in a committed fashion. If you found this video to be of value, please hit the like button, please subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the webinar series and in future videos.